Food you buy every single week is about to cost more, and the window to do something about it is closing fast. The increases you're seeing right now aren't the peak. They're the beginning of a second wave, one that's been building in crop fields, commodity markets, and supplier contracts for 2 to 3 years, and is about to land on shelves near you. I pulled the data on which items are most at risk, and there's one on this list, number 4, where prices at the source have already jumped over 200%. The shelf just hasn't caught up yet. These 10 items, why each one is moving, and what to do before the next round hits. Let's go. Number 10. Pasta. Let's open with the one almost nobody thinks is vulnerable. Pasta. Cheap, reliable, always there. It's been the default backup meal for so long that most people have stopped thinking of it as something that could meaningfully change in price. That assumption is exactly what makes this one worth paying attention to. Here's what's happening at the source. Pasta is made from durum wheat, a specific hard variety that only grows well in a narrow range of climates. The main producing regions are Canada, parts of the northern United States, and the Mediterranean. In recent years, every one of those regions has taken hits from heat stress and drought during the most critical growing windows. Yields have dropped. Global durum supply is tighter than it's been in years. And that's just the raw ingredient side of it. Layer on top of that, higher energy costs for milling and processing, rising packaging costs, and elevated transportation expenses. Every stage of moving pasta from a field to your shelf has gotten more expensive. At the same time, the grain supply itself has tightened. The result is already visible at retail. Name brand spaghetti that was reliably under $2 a box has crossed that threshold in most markets. Store brands that held under $1 have moved up. Even the deep discount chains, the ones that held out longest on price, have moved past points that, once you see them, don't come back down. Here's the number that makes it practical. A household using 3 or 4 boxes of pasta per month is spending somewhere between $20 and $40 more per year on pasta alone, compared to 2 or 3 years ago. That's one item. Multiply that across a full shopping cart, and you start to understand how bills grow without any single dramatic price increase to explain it. Dried pasta lasts 2 to 3 years in a sealed container. It takes up almost no space, and it pairs with 3 other items coming up on this list. 10 to 15 extra boxes on your next run. That's genuinely all this takes. Number 9. Oats. If pasta caught you off guard, oats might actually frustrate you. Because oats are supposed to be the one staple that just stays cheap no matter what. The unglamorous, always there option. And relative to most foods, they still are. But the trend line has shifted, and the forces behind it aren't going anywhere fast. Canada is the world's largest oat exporter and supplies a major share of what the US market consumes. What's happened there over the past few growing seasons isn't one dramatic event. It's something quieter and harder to bounce back from. Consecutive years of weather disruption across the Canadian prairies that have reduced yields not by a lot in any single year, but steadily, season after season. That kind of consistent pressure depletes reserves in ways that take time to rebuild. Then add rising transportation costs for moving grain from Western Canada down to American processing facilities. Add rising energy costs for the processing and packaging itself. None of these are shocking on their own. Together, they've pushed a mainstream canister of rolled oats past $5 in most stores, up from under $4 not that long ago. The storage case here is solid. Rolled oats in a sealed container stay good for 18 to 24 months easily. Steel-cut oats hold even longer. Bulk bags from a warehouse store or bulk section cost less per ounce than the standard canisters. And oats pull weight across breakfast, baking, smoothies, and grain bowls. The versatility makes this a reliable purchase even beyond the pricing argument. Buying an extra canister or bag now is about as low effort as it gets. The price is still reasonable. That won't stay true indefinitely. Number 8. Canned tuna and canned salmon. This is where the list starts getting into territory most people haven't thought about. Canned fish has been a reliable household staple for generations. Easy protein, no refrigeration needed, long shelf life, and for most of that time, genuinely affordable. That last part is changing faster than most shoppers have noticed. Here's the core problem. The cost of commercial fishing has gone up across multiple areas at once. Fuel for vessels has stayed elevated. Labor costs have climbed. Catch limits, put in place to protect fish populations over the long term, and rightly so, have reduced the volume coming out of several key fisheries. Fewer fish caught under more expensive conditions. At the same time, demand for shelf-stable protein has gone up as shoppers look for affordable alternatives to fresh meat, which has had its own significant price run over the same period. Less supply, higher demand. That math only goes one way. A standard can of chunk-light tuna has roughly doubled in price over 3 years in many markets. What cost around $1 now approaches $2. Canned salmon has risen even more steeply. Premium brands in the category are now hitting $4 to $5 per can. Shelf life on canned fish runs 3 to 5 years. A case of 12 to 24 cans fits on a single shelf. And the usefulness across pasta, salads, rice bowls, and sandwiches makes it one of the most practical items to buy ahead of where this category is heading. This isn't a temporary blip. It's a structural repricing. Buying a case now, at today's price, is buying at a price that doesn't fully reflect where the category is going. Number 7. Peanut butter. This one has a mechanism behind it that most people have never heard of. And once you understand it, you'll start noticing it everywhere. It's not just that peanut butter has gotten more expensive. It's that it's gotten more expensive in a way that was deliberately designed so you wouldn't catch it. The underlying cost story is real. Peanut production in the U.S. is concentrated in Georgia, Alabama, and surrounding southern states. Erratic weather during growing windows has reduced yields in recent years. Processing, packaging, and trucking costs have all gone up independently. Diesel prices alone add a real layer to anything moving by road across a supply chain that long. So peanut butter costs more to make and move than it used to. That's the straightforward part. Here's the part that isn't straightforward. When packaged food companies face rising costs, they often don't raise the sticker price. They reduce the amount inside the package and hold the price about where it was. It's called shrinkflation, and it's engineered specifically to stay below your radar. A jar that was 18 ounces becomes 16. The sticker barely moves. The price per ounce has gone up meaningfully, and most people never catch it because they're comparing what they see on the shelf to what they remember paying, not to how many ounces they're actually getting. If you look at a jar of major brand peanut butter today versus 2 years ago, there's a good chance you're paying a similar price for 2 to 4 fewer ounces. That's a real cost increase hiding behind a price tag that looks the same. Buy in larger sizes where you can. Warehouse clubs tend to hold better per ounce value and are slower to reduce sizes. Peanut butter lasts 9 to 12 months unopened. The sticker hasn't changed much. The value has. Number 6. Rice. We're at the halfway point, and this is where the global picture behind all of these starts to come into focus. Rice feeds more people than any other grain on Earth. That one fact tells you something important about what happens when its supply chain runs into serious trouble. And right now, the global rice market is under more strain than it's seen in over a decade. Not from a single cause, from a sequence of events that hit one after another and never fully cleared. In 2023, India, the world's largest rice exporter, put significant export restrictions on several rice categories. One policy call from one country sent uncertainty rippling through importing nations almost immediately. Thailand and Vietnam, two other major exporters, responded to the shifting global demand by tightening their own output. Then El Niño weather disruptions moved through Southeast Asia, damaging crops in key growing regions right at the moment global buyers were already scrambling for alternatives. Policy shock, export tightening, weather damage, all in sequence. The ripple effect from that chain of events is still working through the system today. At the store level, it shows up like this. The big bags of jasmine rice that warehouse clubs once used as high-traffic display items near the entrance have moved to smaller displays with noticeably higher price tags. Generic white rice that was under $1 per pound has moved to $1.30 or $1.40 in many markets. A difference that doesn't feel dramatic per purchase, but adds up meaningfully over a year. Now here's what makes rice stand out from almost everything else on this list. White rice stored in a sealed, airtight container in a cool, dry spot can hold its quality for 20 to 30 years. That's not an exaggeration. It's one of the most shelf-stable foods that exists. Buying an extra 10 or 20 pound bag this week Sealing it properly and setting it aside is one of the simplest ways to lock in today's pricing on something you'll definitely use. By the time you reach that second bag, it'll have cost you less than buying it fresh at that point would have. We're about halfway through, and if any of these have surprised you so far, drop the item number in the comments. It helps me understand which of these are actually flying under the radar for people. Number 5. Coffee. If you drink coffee every morning, you've already noticed something has shifted. The canister looks the same, the price doesn't. But most people don't actually know why it changed. And more importantly, most people don't know that what's happened so far might only be part of it. Start at the source. Brazil is the world's largest coffee producer. Over the past several growing seasons, its key coffee regions have been hit by frost, drought, and irregular rainfall that caused real damage to Arabica crops. Vietnam, the second largest producer globally and the main source of Robusta beans, faced its own serious drought conditions during the same period. Global coffee futures spiked to levels not seen in decades. Most people are vaguely aware that prices went up. What most people don't know is why the full impact hasn't landed on the shelf yet. Here's the mechanism. Major coffee brands don't buy their beans at live market prices. They use forward contracts, agreements locked in months or even years in advance at fixed prices. Many of those contracts were signed before the commodity market moved significantly. So the brands have been operating on old prices while the actual market has moved well past them. That arrangement holds until the contracts come up for renewal. When those agreements expire and brands renegotiate at current market rates, the gap between what they were paying and what they now have to pay transfers outward. Analysts following this category are projecting another 10 to 20% at retail within the next 6 months as that renegotiation cycle completes across the industry. What you're paying right now is partially protected pricing. That protection has an expiration date. And for a lot of contracts, that date is getting close. A mainstream canister of ground coffee has already risen $2 to $3 over the past year. That's before the next round finishes. Whole beans stored sealed in a cool, dark space hold quality for 6 to 9 months. Ground coffee stays good for 3 to 5 months sealed past the best buy date. 1 or 2 extra canisters now. You're not buying more than you need. You're buying at a price that's about to look better than anything on the shelf in 6 months. Number 4. Cocoa powder and baking chocolate. This is the one I mentioned at the start. And I want to be careful here, because when I first saw these numbers, I went back and confirmed them before I was comfortable repeating them out loud. Global cocoa commodity prices have increased by more than 200% in some contracts compared to where they stood just 2 years ago. Take a second with that. 200%. On something sitting in the baking cabinet of tens of millions of homes? The cause is actually not complicated, but the severity of it is real, and it's the kind of problem that doesn't get fixed in one growing season. West Africa produces more than 60% of the world's cocoa. Ghana and Ivory Coast are the 2 biggest producers by a significant margin. Both have been hit with compounding problems over the same stretch. Tree disease spreading through orchards, aging trees that are well past their most productive years, swings between extreme flooding and drought, and decades of not investing enough in planting new trees to replace the old ones. This isn't a single bad harvest. It's a supply problem that took years to build up, and it'll take years, not months, to work through. So the obvious question is, why hasn't a 200% commodity spike already shown up on the label of every cocoa product in the store? Because major chocolate and cocoa companies hedge their purchases through long-term futures contracts, locking in prices years in advance. That contractual buffer is the only reason the full commodity reality hasn't already hit every shelf. Those contracts have been quietly absorbing the gap between market prices and shelf prices for the past 2 years. But contracts expire. As they come up for renewal at current rates, the absorbed cost starts moving outward to the manufacturer, to the retailer, to the shelf price, and eventually to your cart. An 8-ounce container of mainstream cocoa powder that was sitting under $3 in most markets has already moved to nearly $5, and that's the early stage of the repricing. The full pass-through hasn't happened yet. Cocoa powder in a sealed container lasts 2 to 3 years. Baking chocolate bars last even longer. If your household bakes at all, brownies, chocolate cake, hot cocoa in winter, This is the item on this list where the gap between what you'd pay today and what you'll pay in 6 to 12 months is likely to be the most significant. The window is narrowing. This one is worth moving on now. Number 3. Canned tomatoes. Most people think of canned goods as the one category that just stays affordable. Always consistent. Always around $1 a can. Basically immune to the kind of pressure we've been talking about. Canned tomatoes are about to push back on that assumption, and the pressure here is coming from more directions than most people realize. Start with where the tomatoes actually come from. Italy and Spain are major producers of processing tomatoes, the variety grown specifically for canning, not fresh eating. The same drought conditions hammering olive oil production across the Mediterranean are hitting those exact same tomato-growing regions. California, which supplies the bulk of canned tomatoes for the American market, has been managing water scarcity for years. The cost of growing water-intensive crops there has not gone down. Then add this layer that most people overlook. The price of steel used to make the cans themselves has stayed elevated since pandemic-era supply disruptions. That cost never fully normalized. Every can on the shelf carries it, not just the food inside, but the container holding it. Retail food analysts have tracked canned tomato prices rising 20 to 30% over a 2-year window. The forecasts are not pointing toward relief. Here's a simple thing worth paying attention to next time you're in the grocery store. Watch the sales cycle on canned tomatoes. Not long ago, these went on promotion regularly. Real discounts that made stocking up feel like an obvious call. What you'll find now is that promotions are less frequent. And when they do happen, the sale price is roughly what the everyday price was a year ago. The floor has moved. The promotions are now anchored to that new floor. Store-brand crushed tomatoes that sat at $1 a can are now $1.40 to $1.60 in many markets. Name brands have crossed $2. 2 to 5 year shelf life. Goes into pasta sauce, soups, chili, braised dishes, rice. One of the most broadly useful items in any kitchen, and every can you buy today is a hedge against a category that's moving consistently in one direction. Number 2. Honey. Most people don't really think about honey until they reach for it, see the price, and feel something's off. That's exactly how this kind of slow-moving price shift works. It stays below awareness until it doesn't. On the domestic side, U.S. bee populations continue to face serious, ongoing pressure. Colony collapse disorder, cumulative pesticide exposure, habitat loss from development, and increasingly unpredictable weather all suppress domestic honey production. The U.S. fills the gap by importing a large share of its supply, primarily from Argentina, Brazil, India, and Vietnam. Import costs have risen with global shipping rates and currency shifts, and there have been persistent problems with adulterated honey entering the market, products diluted or mislabeled, which has led to tighter testing requirements and stricter import controls. Those controls are necessary, but they further reduce the volume of qualifying product that actually comes through. The result is a steady upward climb at retail. Name brand clover honey that was $5 or $6 is now $7 to $8 in most major grocery chains. Raw and locally produced honey, when you can find it, is often $10 to $15 for a comparable jar. But here's what actually reframes this item. Honey is one of the only foods on Earth with a genuinely indefinite shelf life when kept properly sealed. Not 2 years. Not 5 years. Archaeologists have recovered honey from ancient burial sites, thousands of years old, still chemically intact. Properly sealed honey doesn't spoil. It can crystallize over time, and that's easily fixed with some gentle warmth, but it doesn't expire in any meaningful sense. That single fact changes the math entirely. Buying a larger container of honey right now isn't just buying a few months' worth. It's locking in today's price on something that's going to cost more from here on out, and will never go to waste. No expiration pressure, no risk of loss. If you use honey at all, in tea, baking, marinades, on toast, this is one of the simplest, lowest risk decisions on this entire list. If this has been useful so far, a quick like actually helps more people find it. Much appreciated. Number 1. Olive oil. We save this for last because this isn't a pressure that's still approaching. It's already here, and there's a second wave building right behind the first one. Spain produces roughly 45% of the world's olive oil. For 3 consecutive growing seasons, the Iberian Peninsula has been through severe drought. Not the temporary kind that dents a harvest and sorts itself out the following year, the kind that damages the trees themselves, root systems, structural health, productive capacity, in ways that persist long after the weather conditions improve. That's the critical distinction. Even if rainfall normalizes tomorrow, supply doesn't bounce back on the same timeline. The trees carry the damage forward into the next season and the one after that. Data from the International Olive Council shows global olive oil stocks at historically low levels heading into 2026. Wholesale prices have more than doubled compared to 2022. That's the upstream reality that's already locked in. Here's what's been happening on the retail side, and why the worst of the impact hasn't fully reached the shelf yet. Retailers have been absorbing a portion of that wholesale increase rather than passing all of it to consumers at once. That's a buffer, not a solution. The next round of price negotiations between retailers and their suppliers is already underway. And those conversations aren't about whether prices will go up again, they're about the pace and timing of when they do. Industry projections point to another 15 to 20% increase at the retail level in the near term. Extra virgin olive oil that ran $6 or $7 a bottle 2 years ago is now sitting at $11 to $13 in most markets. Budget-level brands, the accessible entry point for everyday cooking, are disappearing from shelves as suppliers pull back from lower-margin products first. When the cheapest option disappears, the floor goes up for everyone else. 2 or 3 extra bottles stored in a cool, dark location, away from the stove, away from direct light. Olive oil holds good quality for 18 to 24 months unopened. Of everything on this list, this one has the clearest documentation, the most visible current impact, and the most direct evidence of a second wave on the way. If you're only going to act on one item from this list, this is the one to start with. Let's take a step back, because what you just heard isn't 10 separate stories about 10 different products. It's one story, playing out across 10 different categories at the same time. The first thread running through all of them is climate disruption in the world's main producing regions. Spain's olive groves, Southeast Asia's rice fields, West Africa's cocoa orchards, Canada's grain belts, Brazil's coffee regions. In every case, the most important growing areas for these commodities have faced not one difficult season, but consecutive, compounding years of abnormal conditions that deplete reserves and don't simply reset between seasons. The second thread is cost inflation embedded at every stage of getting food from the ground to your shelf. Energy prices affect farming equipment, irrigation, cold storage, processing, and the fuel moving everything by truck, rail, and ship. When energy costs go up, every calorie that reaches your table carries a higher embedded price, regardless of what the harvest looked like. The third thread is the pandemic-era disruption that never fully resolved. Global supply chains were stress-tested starting in 2020. Shipping bottlenecks, material shortages, labor gaps. Many of those vulnerabilities have continued in some modified form rather than returning to where they were. The system is still running with less slack than it had before. The fourth thread is shrinkflation, the deliberate practice of reducing what's inside a package while holding the sticker price roughly steady. Built specifically to stay below the awareness threshold of most shoppers, the jar gets lighter, the price barely moves. Nobody notices until they start looking. And the fifth thread is the lag between what commodity markets are doing and what shows up on the shelf. What you pay today often reflects costs from months ago. Brands hedge, absorb, and delay the pass-through. But there's a limit to how long that delay holds. What's been happening upstream eventually arrives at checkout. And right now, for several of these categories, that arrival is already underway. Those 5 forces operating at the same time across multiple food categories are what makes this moment different from ordinary inflation. This isn't prices just drifting upward because of a bad year somewhere. It's structural pressure from multiple directions compressing simultaneously. On supply, on input costs, and on the systems that move food from producers to stores. And that's the thing worth keeping in mind as we close this out. This isn't about fear. It isn't about stockpiling for an emergency or bracing for a worst-case scenario. It's about recognizing that specific items with documented supply problems and long shelf lives, are going to cost more than they do right now. And that buying an extra bottle of olive oil, a few more cans of tomatoes, or an additional bag of rice is a completely rational response to information that's already out there in the data. Every item on this list shares three things. There's documented upstream pressure driving it. The shelf life is long enough that buying ahead actually makes sense. And you were going to buy these things anyway. You're not changing what you consume. You're just shifting when you buy it, while the price is still lower than where it's going. The gap between people who act on this now and people who end up reacting to it later isn't about income or resources. It's simply about having the information and deciding to use it. You have the information. Start with 2 or 3 items on your next grocery run. Add them to a normal cart. Repeat it over the next couple of months. That's not a dramatic strategy. It's just a slightly smarter version of shopping you were already going to do. And a few months from now, your pantry will quietly reflect that. Which of these 10 surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious which ones people haven't been tracking.